Another weekend edition of Dome Theory, group chat edition as well. Taylor McCloud is here. Everyone else chilling, enjoying football. I wasn't having too much fun watching today, Taylor. The games kind of stunk, especially the 4 o'clock games, and they're still ongoing. Maybe Jets Cowboys is decent, but I'm ready for basketball already. We'll get to some football at the end here before the Patriots get going tonight, and John and all of them will have Patriots post game down at Gillette after the Sunday night Pats Dolphins game. But we start with our Red Sox, Taylor. I know you were probably stunned to see it. I predicted Bloom would be out by August this year. He ends up gone mid-September. Again, the Red Sox fire their GM mid-season as they did with Dave Dombrowski here. 4 years for Bloom. Right around 500 record-wise. I think they finished just above 500 during his time here. Overall, though, inconsistent, all over the place. Pitching, a disaster, and it's gotten worse since. Well, actually, no, the pitching was decent this weekend, but overall, the pitching has been what's killed them this season. Fielding, debacle after debacle, mismatched rosters, guys playing at different positions. We talked about the Betts trade a couple weeks ago when the Dodgers came through, and this is it now for him. So I'm glad to see it. I know you wanted to see him get another chance if there wasn't a clear replacement out there, and there doesn't seem to be here. But yeah, this wasn't a great time in Red Sox history, so I wasn't too upset to see it come to an end. In fact, I was anxiously awaiting this day.
Yeah, I said it to you over text, and we've talked about it. My whole thing is there just has to be a better replacement. I don't like the idea of changing for the sake of change because you never know. I mean, I know some of the names have been floating out there. Obviously, the big one was Theo, and that's not going to happen. Sam Kennedy said that during the press conference that it's not happening. And then there was some conversation about Sabian, who built the Giants dynasty early in the season before Bloom was let go. And now, there's Gomes from LA, Antonetti from Cleveland. So you have these candidates out there, and that's my thing. It's like the replacement just has to be better. And you and I might fall on different ends of the spectrum with this conversation, but I think we fall on different ends of the spectrum, but it's ultimately like we agree on the path forward. And it's this next person, whoever gets the job, they have to spend money. They have to build a team that's contending for World Series championships. And that's not something that Bloom ever did, but I also don't know how possible it was with the restraints put on him. And you can say this, you can say that, but it's clear that from the beginning, he was brought in to lower expenses, to play on the margins, and that's a really dangerous game. And when you're the Boston Red Sox, you don't need to do that. And I think Jeff Passan from ESPN put it really well this week. He said Bloom was asked to rebuild the farm, to compete for World Series, and stay under the luxury tax all at the same time. And that's a combination that doesn't work. You can't have those three things in tandem. Now, there are examples like last year I thought was horrible. Going over the luxury tax in a season that was as bad as last year is unacceptable. And there's certain things that have happened throughout the Bloom tenure that are fireable offenses. And you're never going to hear me say, oh, he shouldn't have been fired because he didn't make any mistakes. My whole thing was he was pretty much doing what they asked of him, except for the competing for World Series. But when you consider the entire picture, competing for World Series under those circumstances, under those conditions, isn't the easiest thing in the world. And it is what it is. We're getting these reports now that there were rumblings of stuff like this beforehand, but now we're getting the reports that, there were trades on the table for certain guys that would have maybe not helped the on-field product, but helped the checkbook, helped the flexibility, helped help things moving forward. And those deals weren't made because there was maybe some trepidation on Bloom's part.
So let me start there, because that's where I do give him some leeway, because all the deals we heard about was their Sale one, Paxton, of course, a couple of guys like that. They probably should have traded Duvall too, looking back on it. But as I say that, and you've said this to me too, if they did that, I would have killed them. because I
Right.
saw I saw potential in this team. I thought they had the ability to sneak into the playoffs and the baseball playoffs more and more now. If you're in, you can get hot and go on a run like hockey. It's become more and more that way over the last couple of years. They did in 2021 after a season that wasn't all that different from the last two we've seen here, where they finished or they're gonna finish now in last. So that's where I do give him some leeway. Great guy by all accounts. I was surprised by the defense of him though, and you put it there with the payroll, ownership taking much of the blame. I feel like a lot of people, and obviously not you, tuned out this team a couple years ago and just woke up and saw him fired and said, "This is for Bloom. This is for Betts. This is for letting Bogarts go." The big stuff, because the big stuff obviously falls on ownership here. But me and you, in it day to day, watching all these moves, one reliever up, the other going down, all these kind of mismatched pieces trying to play different positions, guys who are probably minor league level talents trying to fill everyday positions at the big league. That corner cutting by him, and obviously part of that is limited payroll, I think cost this team more than anything else, because they did have the top end talent over the last couple of years. When you think about Devers, when you think about Turner this year was awesome. The bullpen this year was just sensational at the back end. They had some things really going for them, but it was just the holes and the worst parts of the roster that really held them back. The defense last 2 years was unlike anything I've ever seen. All the mistakes, but baffling game costing mistakes, really. The base running, horrible. There were just things about this team that made the borderline unwatchable that I was ready to see come to an end. And we'll get to Cora in a minute here, but I put a lot of that back on the way these teams were built. Not just because they were limited in payroll. Of course, that's the biggest problem, them not contending for a World Series. But they really weren't even a playoff team these last 3 seasons, just because of how much they leaned on these guys like Pablo Reyes and Urias, and I'm trying to think of some of the guys that were on last year's roster that they were relying on. There were just a lot of guys who fell short of being as consistent as they needed to be. And then, of course, you know what I think killed them too, Taylor? The stuff like the Vasquez trade. This clubhouse, I don't think really loved the way he oversaw things, wasn't present at the deadlines. That was the big debacle there, trading Vasquez. And I know it was a good trade looking back on it, but it was a beloved guy in the clubhouse, and they really stumbled after that, not adding and trying to sell last year. They sat in the middle of this year, which I think probably cost him his job more than anything else looking back on it. And then I even think of the Plawecki thing, which no one remembers, but they cut Plawecki, the backup catcher, and the clubhouse was furious just to bring up a minor league bullpen arm who got shelled that night. So that's the kind of stuff. There's just all these little things that I think added up, and the park being empty, that doesn't help, and mostly road fans filling it when it is filled. And I'm sure the TV numbers were just atrocious this year.
Yeah, it's certainly a combination of a bunch of things, and it's little. I think the timing of his firing is confusing because from the beginning of this season, they pretty much told us this isn't the year. Like there was no like rally, like okay, like yeah, 2023, like going after it. It wasn't that. I think that 2022 was a considerably worse season than this year. I think that the mistakes that were made last year from the offseason where you trade Hunter Renfroe for Jackie Bradley Jr.,
That
which
was so off. That's my least favorite movie ever made.
yeah, I mean, now it looks kind of like it's kind of like a wash at this point because
Who were
you
the
know Jack.
prospects who came back in that one?
The biggest one was Alex Bonellis, and then I think David Hamilton was part of that deal as well.
Yeah, just
Hamilton. You know, he just I think set the AAA record for steals in a season. So he's talented. He's definitely in over his head when they tried to play him at shortstop. That was the carousel of shortstops before Trevor Story came back.
yeah.
I think last year there were more errors than this season. I think this season you had a team that they've definitely let go of the rope since that second Houston series. And so I'm not passing judgment on anything after that Dodgers series because that kind of was like a turning point for the season where I think that they punted that last game against LA. They let Chris Murphy get destroyed. And then the night after that, when the idea was, all right, we have the bullpen moving forward for this Houston series, because this Houston series is,
And they were still in it. What were they, 3-4 games
they were
back? They were in it for a
they were
long time.
they were 5.5 back to start that second Houston series, but Houston was in front of them. So you know what I mean? You take 2 or 3, then
Yeah.
you're at least, 4.5. You could be 3.5 back. And then, so after the Murphy game, the night after was the Barraclough game, and it was terrible. And
Oh my God, he gave up what, 8-9
he
runs?
gave up 10 earned runs in like
Oh my
4.5
God.
innings. And so it's stuff like that. After that point, it's like they gave up. They showed us they gave up on the field. They showed us they gave up front office wise. Like that was a super, like, raise the white flag. Like, yeah, they said all the right things in the weeks after that, but like to punt 2 games in a row when you're kind of like flailing a little bit is like, that's all right. We've had enough of this. So anything after that point, like, I know that they've slipped in the standings since then. I know it's been pretty bad since then, but I think going back to 2022 to push over the luxury tax in the season when, yes, you were supposed to compete, but from the very beginning they had a terrible April. They were okay May, great June, and then they fell off a cliff after June last season. To be not even really in the hunt at the deadline, and that add someone like Eric Hosmer, and which didn't help at all. I think he played 17, 15 games, something like that, and then went on the IL. I think last year was a much bigger black mark on Chaim Bloom than this season. This season, you have a lot of really successful moves that happened. I mean, Kenley Jensen, Masataka Yoshida, Justin Turner, Chris Martin, and I'm sure Adam Duvall. Like, I'm sure there's other ones that I'm missing, or even something like believing in Costas after a really hard April, right? They could have sent him down. They could have pulled up Dahlbeck. They could have pulled up anybody or said, Justin Turner, hey, you're going to play every day until someone comes up. So I think this season, they told us from the beginning this wasn't the year. So I think the timing of firing Bloom on like September 9th of 2023 was a little curious, because it's like, in my mind, it's almost like fire him after 2022 or give him 2024. Like it's kind of one of those things where it's like 2022, you pushed over the luxury
I
tax.
couldn't do it another year though. If we went into this winter and just saw these.
Yeah, but this winter would have been the first time that the prospect capital is there and the real money is there. And so that was part of why it was like, it didn't make sense to me, where it's like, are you going to let the guys see the plan through or not? And clearly they didn't. And clearly the picture is getting more clear of ownership changing their mind every 4 to 5 years since Theo Epstein left, right? So like Theo leaves, Charrington takes over. That was the year that they traded Beckett, they traded Gonzalez, they traded Crawford, all of the Dodgers. They got way under the tax. That was during the Bobby Valentine season, the 100-year season. That was terrible. Ortiz tears his Achilles, whatever. The idea then was, all right, we're going to concentrate on player development, right? That was the whole thing. Player development. Kind of fall backwards into a World Series in 2013, which is a crazy thing to say. Like, you don't fall backwards, but that World Series wasn't expected at the beginning of that season. And then 2 years later, Charrington's gone, right? And so this whole idea of player development, you fire the guy who started it, but then you see the fruits of that labor in Xander Bogaerts and Mookie Betts and Andrew Benintendi, Rafael Devers, Jackie Bradley Jr. You saw that, and that was a huge part of the next World Series. But then again, then you go big payroll. You bring in David Price, you bring in Chris Sale, you bring in JD Martinez, go big payroll, win a World Series, and fire the guy the year after. So we're seeing a pattern here where even if you win World Series, you get fired, right? And that's kind of an alarming thing. So Chaim Bloom, they went to the ALCS. I know you love the 2021 season. I know a lot of people love the 2021 season. And in a way, that's like it's not a World Series, obviously, and I don't want to make it that, but it's like, that's a hugely successful run. That was a magical playoff run. And I don't know. I think this is a bigger thing looking at ownership than it is at Chaim Bloom. Chaim Bloom rebuilt the farm system. You went from 30 to top 5 in multiple respected rankings. I know that Pipeline has them 15 or 16, but Fangraphs has them top 5. Baseball America has them top 5. And, and I tend to lean a little closer to those two than I do Pipeline. I mean, MLB.com had the Red Sox winning 68 games this year, and had they not let go of the rope, like they would clear that by a lot. They've already
But they're
cleared
at
that.
70, right?
They're at
They're
74 right now.
74, yeah. They
So
haven't made it too much further with the last couple of weeks, but
no,
what they need to do going forward, and you mentioned 2013, you had the young guys back then, but you also paid and acquired some solid veterans that you knew could play their positions every day. Steven Drew, Victorino, Gomes. You had a few guys like that on this year's team, like Turner. What kills me about this season, and he had a couple great games this past week too. Turner was so good this year. It might be his last good season at his age. So to waste Jansen, who was fantastic, Martin's ERA's 1. You mentioned all those guys. They had a handful of those guys, but shortstop's empty, second base empty, outfield kind of in flux for parts of this year. And of course, starting pitching, you only really had 2 or 3 arms you could go to for much of this year. And I didn't even mention the whole opener debacle for much of this year. So whether you're cheaping out on those kind of guys or you're spending big money on those kind of guys, you have to have them. And then to go into the deadline knowing you don't have them and not address it. The biggest problem with Bloom is this isn't, and he used to say it himself, which would drive me crazy. This isn't a fan base. This isn't a city that's going to sit here and watch a bunch of awful major league seasons in a row waiting for the young guys to start to fulfill their potential. And many of the guys you mentioned are probably a couple of years from playing solid MLB baseball here. So you couldn't wait. I think Bloom's vision probably sat 2-3 years away. And I certainly wouldn't have made it even half of next year watching products similar to this year's. And there were some nights, that I had a lot of fun this year, and they stayed in the mix, and they were close, and they fought back, and they had walk-off grand slams, and they had some awesome wins. I think for a lot of this season, they had one of the highest comeback win totals in the league. But the bad nights, the McGuire celebrating as he got doubled off second, errors, even Rafaela this week, just a blunder emblematic of so many they've had over the last couple of years here. It drove me crazy. And I know a lot of fans reached the point where they didn't even want to watch anymore. And once you get to that point, you have to pivot, to go back to your earlier point, towards something else. And we'll see what that is here. I wouldn't mind Cora as GM. And I don't know if he'd be able to handle GM and manager at the same time.
no.
But I think he has the pedigree, he has the success, and he has the connections around the league, I think, that make you say he should be the face of this team going forward if there isn't any other certain option. Because he's in the clubhouse. He knows so many of these guys. He knows what they need. And I think him as a former player, which matters too to some degree, I think, can identify talent better than some of these people who are a little more analytically driven. And you need those analytics. You need those guys who come from that background. You need a mix of voices in there, I think. But when it comes to the final say, when it comes to knowing what this team needs, being aggressive, I think Cora is going to lean more in that direction than someone who's like Bloom, because the last thing that they can do here is just hire someone else like Bloom. They can't, and a lot of, I think, executives in baseball now fall under that kind of background. So I'd rather veer toward a guy like Cora, who's been in the game, who played, who has connections across so many different parts of the game, I'm sure, from just all his years he's been around it, rather than, I don't know, what was even Bloom's background coming into baseball?
Bloom's been in the game for I think 19 years. He was with Tampa Bay. He's by all accounts he's brilliant, right? And everything says to me, and this isn't one, because let me back up. The fact that all these reports about him being too cautious are coming out right after he gets fired, to me is like, all right, we've seen this before, and the Red Sox are great at getting out ahead of the story before and feeding you everything you want so that the person who's on their way out is the bad guy. They did it with Terry Francona. They did it with Mookie Betts. They did it with Chaim Bloom. So let me get ahead of it and say they're really good at making sure that the person who's on their way out gets a lot of the blame. The only person who didn't get that in the moment really was Dombrowski, and I think that was because it was so close to a World Series. The thing that I've been able to take from everything every report about Chaim Bloom, and this is before he was let go, this is seasons old stuff, is that he didn't seem necessarily comfortable taking a risk on a trade. Like the trades had to be either low stakes or it had to be a very clear win for the Red Sox. Which, you know, I'm all for, you know, guy like someone
a little Danny-esque almost.
in a way, yes. And I think that's a good comparison. It's not, I mean, Dombrowski was the kind of guy who would go trade Manuel Margot to the Padres for Craig Kimbrell, and then he would turn around and trade Yoan Moncada to Chicago for Chris Sale, and he'd put, you know, $217 million down for David Price, and all of a sudden you're looking at a brand new team with like real high-end talent combined with your Bogarts, who had been in the league for a while, Mookie Betts, who's coming up, Jackie Bradley Jr., who had been in for a while. You have Benintendi debut in 16. I think Rafael Devers debut in 17.
Yeah, you have the mix.
Right. You had that perfect combination. And I'm sure that this next guy, this next general manager, this next chief baseball officer, because, you know, the Red Sox love to make that title up, will benefit from the same thing. Like if the checkbook is open and they can go land a, you know, Yamamoto from Japan or a Blake Snell or a Aaron Nola or
how
someone,
about this for a name?
Well, right.
Shohei Ohtani.
Right. Or Shohei. If they go put the money down and bring in that top end talent without having to get rid of any prospects. And then if you do want to flip prospects for another pitcher, you can, like a Corbin Burns or someone like that. That's great. But then you're still going to have the guys left over to combine with the top end talent, which ultimately was Bloom's vision. It's to make a sustainable product that competes for the division year in and year out, because it's a very strange pattern that we've had in our lifetime, Bob, where they've been the most successful franchise in the 21st century. They have 4 World Series. The Giants have 3, Houston has 2, St. Louis has 2, but they have the most. They have the most World Series, and they've only really been competitive 2 years in a row, one time. Like 2007, they won the World Series. 2008, they went to the ALCS. And especially in the last decade and a half, you win the World Series in 13, you're last place in 14. You win in 18, you have the same team come back in 19, then you finish in 3rd place, last place in 2020. So I think the ultimate vision, the ultimate goal, which is every team's goal, but especially what Chaim Bloom was brought in to do, is to build a product that can replenish itself when those top end guys either leave or they fall off or whatever. And he didn't get to see that to fruition. And I think it's so important that the next guy or the next woman who takes over the Red Sox does that, because I am like, yes, a World Series every couple years is incredible.
He got 4 years though. And I know the first year's weird because it wasn't even a season, but
no, it wasn't even a season. And then 2021, again, like that was a really good team to start the year. Then they struggled a lot in the second half, ended up in the playoffs, and there's no place like Fenway for the playoffs, right? So you harness that magic, especially with people excited coming off COVID, like back in the stadium. It was. And so it
was unlike anything I've seen.
There was lightning in a bottle for that season, and it was perfect. And it didn't work out, but I don't know. You and I have talked about this before. I think 2021 almost like made people forget the plan a little bit, and it's like, hey, this wasn't necessarily supposed to happen. Like Nathan Eovaldi stayed healthy for the first and only time in his career, like healthy for a whole season. He comes in 4th in Cy Young. I mean,
you would have taken him this year, though, wouldn't you?
No, he got hurt again. He gets hurt every single season, every year.
So did Sale.
But Sale gets hurt every season too. He's not a guy that I'm, locked into. And I think, I don't know, it just is what it is. I think 2022 was a worse season than 2023. Whether the record shows that at the end of the year, who knows? But last year you had the talent to compete. You're coming off an ALCS appearance, and you're terrible. And this year was advertised as a bridge, whether fans want to hear that or not, but it was advertised as a bridge, and that's exactly what it was. I mean, I know at the deadline they were 2 back, and everyone wants them to go make a splash at the deadline. But if you look at the splashes that were made at the deadline, none of them worked out. Like any of those pitchers that they could have gone and gotten, Lucas Giolito, Michael Lorenzen, anyone like that, they haven't pitched well. And they're going, Lorenzen went to Philly, so that's a comparable situation. But like Giolito went to Anaheim, and he got put on waivers because he was pitching so poorly, and the Angels kind of gave up too. But I don't know. It's just
What we're
this
not
season.
able to say is who among the prospects they have just is going to flame out and do nothing.
Well,
Because
right, and
those are the
that's
kind of
where
guys you have to identify and move ahead of time. Because,
exactly, and that's what Dombrowski did perfectly.
yeah,
Like
it's
Dombrowski chose the perfect guys to let go. If you look at, I mean, Manuel Margot, I think he plays for Tampa now, but he was supposed to be like a guy. He's not. Even
Moncada.
they traded Anderson Espinoza for Drew Pomeranz, and he didn't turn into anything. Espinoza didn't. Moncada, he's in the bigs, but he's not very good.
Yeah.
Michael Kopech, same trade in the bigs, not very good. You hold on to
And honestly,
Benintendi and Devers.
most of these guys aren't going to be very good. So leaning on the side of aggression, I think, is better than holding back on everything and trying to wait till the best possible moment to move these guys. It is so comparable to Ainge, and I know the two executives are much different in their pedigree and all that, even their careers. Ainge, one of the greats at what he did, but he held so many picks. He really did. And the one he gave up in that Brooklyn trade for Kyrie, which even considering where it went with Kyrie was a pretty good trade.
Absolutely.
The pick they gave up there, which could have been another top 10, top 5 pick, just ended up being Colin Sexton. And it's like, all right, even the stuff that went after him, if they picked someone else in that spot, I don't think there was anything better than that chance you took on Kyrie there. So you need someone with a little more aggressiveness now. And from a money perspective, this is all going to come down to ownership on something like this. But what better way to lock everybody back in, change the culture on the team dramatically with a guy like this, and up your talent level almost instantly? Ohtani.
Yeah, I mean, I'll wait until it gets picked up, by a few more sources before I really buy into it, because I think that's just like anyone outside of the Dodgers kind of feels like, I don't know. I mean, as a Red Sox fan, I don't want to get my hopes up and then, it doesn't even come close to happening. I mean, that would be great. He's the best player in baseball, and you can take his pitching away and he's still probably the best player in baseball. So I would love that. I think that they have, and it sounds crazy to say this, I think they have bigger needs. I think they need 2 frontline pitchers. And people are like, oh, we need 1. No, they need 2. They need 2 guys to slot in front of Brian Bayo. And I think Bayo has the ultimate potential to be the ace of the staff, especially if they sign him to an extension like Spencer Strider in Atlanta. I think he has that potential to be the best guy on the staff.
And I do think you have like a 4th and 5th guy in Crawford and Pivetta.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Pivetta has been up and down his whole career. The Chris Sale thing, I don't even want to consider him in this conversation because you just have no idea what you're going to get from him. Yesterday, he goes out throwing only sliders, has a good outing, but the time before, he's terrible. And I think he's made something like 29 starts since he signed his big deal in 2019, and that's just like, you pay a guy $145 million and you expect him to take
I worry
the ball.
about his personality. I do, especially if you're going to move him to a bullpen role or something. I know he said he'd accept it, but would he really? I don't know.
Oh, I think his personality is great. Honestly, he takes full ownership of when he pitches poorly every single time. But there is part of me that's just like, you can only hear that song and dance so many times. Like, all right, I let everybody down. I didn't live up to my expectations.
But do you think he'd move to the bullpen?
I think it'd be a tough decision, but I think in terms of like keeping him healthy, it could be the best thing. And I think at this point, I mean, you pitch for 4 years, making what, $30 million a year, and you barely pitch ever. I think in that last year, you're kind of out of. You don't have the cachet to be like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, every time you started, you get hurt and miss significant time, like every single season.
Yeah. I want to hit on Ohtani real quick. Of course, Sunday Night Football is tonight. Last chance, absolute last chance. This is, I know for a fact, it's going away tomorrow. Get $100 off NFL Sunday ticket. All you got to do is place a $5 bet. I do think tonight's probably a good spot to bet on the Pats here. And I guess we'll sneak in the Pats minute right now. But while we have some time here, but Pats playing the Dolphins tonight. I think the line's 2.5. So there's some optimism in the Pats there. I think most of the money's going to the Dolphins, but get $200 in bonus bets. Just go to FanDuel.com/Boston, and you're going to get $100 off Sunday ticket. I don't know if that'll be back. Definitely going away tomorrow. So place that $5 bet on the Pats here. You can use those bonus bets on them and get yourself Sunday ticket to watch next Sunday's games, all of them on YouTube TV. 21 plus President Massfield, first online real money wager only. And again, $10 deposit required. Head over there to fanduel.com/Boston, official sports wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. Real quick on Ohtani, though, before we do get to the Pats. I want to believe. I do. I think the New Balance thing's real. I've said that too. That stuff matters because Boston still, it's one of those staple baseball cities. If they're on the map and he's pitching in October or hitting October, either one, it's going to matter. And if he was doing what he was doing earlier this year, this would be a no-brainer. I think anyone would want him. The pitching stuff scares me a little bit. This is second Tommy John coming up, right?
I mean, I don't know if he's going to have Tommy John this time, but he's going to have a operation. So even if he gets some internal brace situation like Story or Bryce Harper, like I don't feel great about it.
He'll miss most of the next year, I think, pitching-wise.
Pitching, yeah.
So it's tough. The hitting is good enough that you believe in it. Could he play outfield or something down the line if he doesn't return to pitching? I think you have to consider that. I don't care about the Yoshida thing. It's the stupidest caveat I've ever heard. You're obviously going to add this guy no matter where Yoshida ends up. I think you do it. I do have more pause than I'd ever imagine I would on this, just because the money's going to be so crazy that if he's just a decent DH, it could end up being a scary contract.
Yeah.
But the guy's drive, I know, is just incredible. The base running even is impactful. He'll figure out a way to impact the team, even if he loses that starting pitching. Maybe he relieves. Maybe he ends up in the field down the line. I just believe in him, and he's just such a draw. I think that matters. You got to get people back in the park. You got to restore interest in this team in Boston. I mean, you can't even talk about this team. No one cares. Yep. Everyone's tuned out. This would just change everything instantly. They signed this guy. The place is full opening night next year to see him pitch or hit.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're definitely right. And I mean, you and I talked about it a while ago, but like the Red Sox have one of the best histories in the MLB of signing players from Japan. And they've like Daisuke Matsuzaka is a legend in Japan. Like Yoshida and Ohtani, we saw in the World Baseball Classic, they're close. The Red Sox are going to be in the running for Yamamoto. So like, I think all that matters. I think no matter how much our wonderful chat wants to tell you, it doesn't matter. I think the New Balance thing is important. I think that, like, I don't think they're going to be out of it. And I think because of this second UCL injury, it's going to be an interesting conversation on that contract, because I don't think it's going to be as big as it was going to be. There's still a level of it needs to be big because, you know, Shohei Ohtani is the best player in baseball right now. And he's going to win his second MVP this year. And so you have a guy with incredible pedigree. So the money's going to be huge either way. And, you know, I would love to see it. I think that if it doesn't happen, I'm leaning towards, I really like, they need to pursue Yamamoto out of Japan. It's not very often a guy hits free agency at 25, 26 as the best pitcher in his league. And like, he has dynamic stuff. And then they need another guy. I've been, you know, thinking about Aaron Nola. I know that Blake Snell is in the conversation, but two guys to slot in front of Brian Bayo so that next year, Brian Bayo at 24, turning 25, doesn't have the pressure of being the ace of the staff, because right now, Bayo's the only guy that we feel confident in going out there every fifth day. And the crazy part was he got optioned back to AAA to start this season. Like Bayo made, I think, 1 or 2 starts up. They sent him down, and then an injury pulled him back up, and he's been great since. But you can't have a rookie pitcher as the only guy you rely on. And there was a point, I think, in May where they had their full rotation ready, where you had Sale, Paxton, Bayo, Whitlock, and Houck. And then almost immediately, Sale's shoulder blade goes, Houck gets hit in the face, and then Whitlock leaves a game against the Marlins, and now you're back down to 2.
And I don't trust any of those guys after this year.
No, and then you're back down to 2 starters. So I think that going into this offseason, especially with whoever they end up hiring as the head of baseball operations, you have a long road in front of you. Actually, I won't say a long road. You have a difficult road in front of you because you need to add top of the line talent. Like, you can't play on the margins anymore. Turner and Jansen and all these guys were great signings this year and very helpful, but you need to go out and get the guys, because this is where you have to, and it's something that Chaim Bloom never did. And it's probably my biggest problem with him is he never once acted like fully embraced the power of running the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah.
You know what I
You have
mean?
a lot of assets, opportunities, and money.
And I'm sure we'll never get the full story on how much ownership, really was constraining him from making those moves. But like the best thing about Theo, the best thing about Dave Dombrowski is that when it came time, they were like, no, I'm doing this. You know what I mean? And it worked for both of those guys. So I'm not
Maybe
saying
worried about making mistakes. Yeah, that
yeah,
can hold you back.
and mistakes are going to happen, like Carl Crawford, mistake, right?
Oh.
But when you're the Boston Red Sox, you dump the mistake and move forward. You don't harp on it. And so, I liked him. I believed in the direction he was moving the team. It was a slow moving process, but I believed in it.
Even Sale, you go back in time and you do it. So that back to Ohtani, you do it. Even if it ends up being a mistake, the immediate payoff, you have to think, will be more than worth it. I worry because I see what's going on with Stanton in New York, and if we go back in time, I was so excited of potentially adding Stanton, and that would have been a trade, of course, plus the big contract.
Yeah.
And I'd be losing my mind at where he's at now if that was him in Boston. But this feels different. I think this is just a guy who's gonna be amazing here. Never mind playing with the monster and all that. I'll be running down the street if this happens. I'm not getting my hopes up too high, but the fact that they're in the mix, that's where they should be. If they were just sitting on the sideline and saying, yeah, too much, too risky, they can't do that. They can't be risk averse here. I do want to move on to the Celtics, though. Not a ton going on right now, but a little bit more noise on this Brogdon front, and it is my biggest storyline going into camp. I know everyone's looking at Porzingis' foot. I think that'll be fine. I'm nervous about where this is at with him, and half the story is obviously him being traded and then not getting traded because the deal fell apart. Seemed like there were more talks throughout the offseason of moving on from him, which adds some insult to injury there. And then the injury, the arm injury, which was so bad. He shot 20% after he suffered it, 7% from three in that series, 3 points a game. He couldn't even be out there. And they missed him. Pritchard, he's in position here. Some people believe in him. I'm sure they believe in him too if they were going to move on from Brogdon, either as a dump or just bringing a marginal worse player back. But this guy was awesome for them last year. Not only on the court, sixth man of the year, but off the court too, is one of those veteran voices there. I'm worried, and I'll play this Washburn cut here. This is actually the full statement he made about this that's going around and being aggregated everywhere right now. He said what many have speculated here, that Brogdon wasn't thrilled about what happened last year. So let's see if I can pull the audio up on this here, just sharing the screen. All right, let's see. Taylor, tell me if you can hear this.
Concerned about too, because we've heard nothing, and he's angry with the team. So I don't think communication between the two sides have been fruitful. So he could just say, "Listen, man, I'm not getting no surgery. I'm just gonna let this heal, and y'all just gonna have to wait for me to let it heal." It could be somewhat of a protest for being on the trade block or something. I don't know, but you would think that wouldn't be the case. But we'll see October 2nd. Or that October 3rd, when that first practice is, like, actually who's on the floor.
Well, let's go right there though, because I think that probably raised an eyebrow for people out there listening. If Malcolm Brogdon, I would get it. I'm not blaming him, but if Brogdon's upset with the team,
he is. He was. Yeah,
like, how concerning is that? Well, I mean, that's he was
not happy. I mean, and now was that he was not happy in July? Is he the same level of unhappy?
So that was the gist of it there. That was from Celtics Beat Podcast. You can go check that out here on CLNS. So you're dealing with three things here, Taylor. Hurt, angry, and going back to the bench, too, which we talked about on the Garden Report. The White's, of course, the starting point guard from the jump here. So it's hard to love where this is at.
Yeah, it certainly is. I think last year was interesting, the progression of everything. From the very beginning, it was, hey, this is the best locker room I've been a part of. This is the best group of guys I've been around of. I just want to help the
Slam
team.
dunk trade too, right?
Right.
Nesmith and Tice for him.
Right. And so it's saying all the right things, doing all the right things. And I give him a ton of credit because he always does the right thing. Like, I've never seen a situation where he doesn't. Even when his elbow was hurt, it was, all right, I can't play anymore. Right. It's not like, let me go out there because I'm a competitor. It was,
Yeah, he
no, I
sat that
can't.
game 6.
Right.
Yeah.
It was, I can't do this because my elbow is, hurt. But as the season went on last year, it definitely was there was a few things, and it never really picked up any steam, which is good. But it was, yeah, sacrificing is pretty hard, right? And I'm not sure if you heard some of that stuff. I'm sure you did. But
Yeah.
it went from like, this is the best group of guys I've been around, I love these guys, to, hey, sacrificing is tough. Like, you know what I mean? It's hard. And I'm sure that's a thing where in the beginning it's like, yeah, this is, easy. And then you play 82 games as the sixth man when you're used to being the guy on the Pacers. And it's like, all right, this isn't, but
Well,
you have
he's
to,
got a contract coming up too
I
next
know
year.
he does.
The year after this is the last on his deal, and I think he's going to be extension eligible this fall too.
Yeah.
So
It's one of those things where it's tough because he's never really been on a team that's actively competing for a title. And there are guys who get thrown into trade talks that probably don't deserve to be in trade talks, but that's just how it goes, right? And especially when you're playing for the Celtics. And I mean, you and I are doing it right now. We're taking this thing, right? This thing, and like Malcolm Brogdon didn't come out and he's like, "Oh, I'm furious with the
no,
Boston
we haven't
Celtics."
even heard from him.
Right. And so you and I are doing it right now where you're playing in an environment in a city where the everyone has such a strong opinion. And so then things get much bigger than they even might be in reality. So it's just one of those things that when you're playing for a title contender, you're going to be in trade conversations. They just traded Marcus Smart. Like Malcolm Brogdon, I understand being upset that a trade went through or happened and then didn't go through, but they just traded the guy who everyone called the heart and soul of the team for 5 years now. And it's like, that's just how it goes. So if he's really like furious about being in trade conversations or them trying to trade him, it's like, hey, well, look at the guy who just got shipped out of here, because that guy has given so much more, and it's just a matter of time. But it's
And
like,
him leaving opens up Brogdon's role.
right, exactly. So it's just one of those things where, like Gary said, it's like, let's see who's there October 2nd, October 3rd, because until we hear from him, I don't have a ton of interest in being like, yeah, Brogdon's so mad, like he's gonna, I mean, he could
and he's not going to say that. He's not going to say that when he
right.
arrives.
And he's so professional. So
Yeah.
even if he is upset, he's going to express it in the right ways, and he's going to handle it correctly. And it'll be interesting because I know he's close friends with Jalen. Jalen just got a big contract to stay with the team, so I don't know if Jalen can do anything to not mediate necessarily, but be like, hey, like, you're still on the team, like you're still one of us.
And he's
you're
still
one of the
so
guys.
important,
Right?
and that's
exactly.
my biggest worry. I'm not worried about the bad feelings because that stuff's gonna fade when the ball jumps up. Is he gonna be available? That's still what I'm waiting for. Who's on the floor, as Gary said there. The worst thing in the world would be October 2nd to hear Brogdon needed surgery. He'll be back on Christmas. Because I don't know if they have enough in that backcourt. And we can debate Pritchard here for a minute.
That would be like the Scottie Pippen in '98 thing that we saw in The Last Dance, where it's like, no, he's like, I'm going to enjoy my summer, and I'm going to get my surgery and rehab on company.
Well, that's the thing. We still haven't heard. And I asked Brad in June, I was like, does he need surgery? And he's like, yeah, if he needs it, he can get it. And right now, I think we see that it can heal on its own. And so it was kind of like either way. And we haven't heard anything really on that front since. So yeah. I'm so curious to see where that goes. Maybe he'll be perfectly healthy when he's back. But it was weird. If he needs surgery, it should have happened the day after the East Finals.
Yeah. He and Shohei can rehab from there, Tommy John together.
Man, crazy injury too. And that's where I'll defend him. 3 things. Didn't love the defense, but defended tough in the post. I don't think it was a lack of effort. It's just getting older, and I don't think he was moving at his best. Didn't get to make a ton, but his role was shooting off the ball, and he was as good as anybody in the league at that. In fact, I've never seen a role guy shoot more consistently than he has. It felt like every single game all year last year, he shot well. It'd be like 4 of 8, 5 of 10, 6 of 12. Every single night he was shooting well, and I think he shot about 44% from 3 for the year. He was just incredible in that role. That was the most important role they were bringing him in for. And then the injury, it's not like it was a hamstring. It's not like it was a knee pain or something. It was a crazy elbow injury on a collision. So I can't blame him for that at all. He was super healthy last year for all the injury concerns with him coming in. And Pritchard, love him. He can probably defend as well as Brogdon. The playmaking's probably close-ish, but the shooting, as good of a shooter as Pritchard is, it comes in waves, hot, cold,
Yeah.
and even just being in the right positions to shoot and all of that. So, and size too, a huge difference between those two, of course. So I like Pritchard, but I don't think he can replicate what Brogdon brings to the table.
No, I like Pritchard too. I mean, it like you said, it comes in waves, and I think last year at the trade deadline when he wasn't moved and then said out loud, he's like, I wanted to be traded. You know what I mean? And I think he went on the podcast with Andre Iguodala and Evan Turner and was expressing that, he maybe wanted a different situation. And it's tough because it's only ever been motivated by wanting to get on the floor. It's not like, I hate the Celtics. I hate Brad. I hate Joe. I hate Tatum or Brown. He wants to play. And I think every NBA player is in that boat where they want to play as much as they can. And there's a lot of guys who would play 48.
Money a little bit too. He's the deal's coming up next year.
Absolutely. And so you need to show what you can do to get paid, right?
Yeah.
But that goes hand in hand with just getting on the floor. And so I understand it. I think there are things that have gone on since that trade deadline that have reaffirmed Pritchard's stance on being set where he is for now, at least. And it sucks because there's been so many times that they're like, yeah, we're going to give Pritchard his opportunity. Like he's really going to get his opportunity to show that he can be like the backup point guard. And then they go trade for Malcolm Brogdon. And it's like, never mind.
But that was necessary. I mean, he wasn't very good in the playoffs on the way to the finals.
I'm not saying it wasn't necessary, but it felt multiple times like it was going to line up right for Pritchard to be the guy to get that opportunity. And then he gets pushed back down. So it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes he hasn't been consistent enough to warrant that look. And then other times the look just hasn't been there when we thought it was going to be there. So this is a hugely important season for him because even though this is season 4 for him,
yep,
he's our age. So it's not like he's season 4 like a lot of these guys at 22 or 23 season 4. He's 25 or 26.
Yeah, he played a long time in college.
He played all 4 years. Yeah, and he was great. And so it is a little different situation, but I really like what I've been hearing lately. I like that he's been one of the guys at these preseason workouts commenting on everyone being there and being impressed by that. And I think it's just even though his on the court role has remained pretty small, I think it's up to him to take on more of a role within the team. And be like, hey, I've been here for 4 years and I know how it goes. And I've had really good games and I've had really bad games. And there's a lot to learn from that. And we've heard so many stories about guys who don't play a ton being legitimate like glue for the team, when they're on the floor, but also away from the court. And it's like, you need guys like that. And I hope he gets his opportunity, but if he doesn't, it's up to him to remain level.
It's the story of the league. He's a superstar. He scores 70, 80 points in these pro-ams.
Yeah.
Even when they let him run the show on the last day of the season, he puts up a triple-double. Many guys can do that. But when you're the 8th guy playing 15, 20 minutes, what can you do in that spot? And that's what's going to determine his ability to stay here and thrive, because I don't think anyone looks at him and says he'll be a starter. He's going to keep ascending and keep getting better and, become the future point guard of this team. He's a backup, so he needs to thrive in that role, and I think he's had glimpses of doing that. 2022 probably the best example, but other times with inconsistent minutes, the answer is not always I need more minutes and more shots, because it's just not going to be there, especially on a team like this. That could have happened on the Spurs. I know they almost traded him to the Spurs, but where's your career ultimately go from there? If you want to win a championship, if you want to be a part of a team like this, you got to thrive in that role. If you're looking at the guys in his spot, let's say him, Hauser, O'Shea Brissett. Let me throw his name in there because I love him. Jordan Walsh, Banton, those kind of guys who are, say, fighting for that 8th spot. Who do you have the most confidence in giving them what they need at that spot?
It's between Brissett and Hauser. I was really impressed by Sam Hauser. There was a point last year where Sam Hauser wasn't shooting well, and it's like, all right, that's what you're here for, right? And so, like, if you're not shooting well, then things need to change. But he turned it on, and the way that teams take themselves out of their offense looking for him, he's the most isolated player in the NBA, and it's not he doesn't clamp up everybody, but
he's 6'8", right?
He's 6'8", and what it does to another team is like instead of playing offense, they're coming down the floor and pick and rolling until they have a ball handler on Sam Hauser, and then you're playing one-on-one. So it's like, all right, if you're starting your offense 10 seconds with 10 seconds left in the shot clock every time because you need to look for Hauser, it's like you're not thinking about winning this game. You're thinking about hunting this guy, and it's letting everything else happen on the Celtics terms. Because it's like what the Celtics, like, you know what I mean? Like, they certainly made adjustments to be like, all right, the other team every time coming down, they're going to look for Sam Hauser. So, like, these other 4 guys aren't going to get open at all. So I think I almost trust Hauser more because I've seen it. But you and I are definitely biased about O'Shea Brissett, being from Syracuse and you and I both going there. So I hope that it's Brissett. I would love if he can be the 8th man, and I like Jordan Walsh too. But I think if you ask me right away who it's going to be, I'd say Hauser.
I like the Hauser pick there. He was good last year, and he never really got the chance in the playoffs. He really didn't there. So real quick before we get you out of here, I'll give you like 2 minutes, 3 minutes here on the Pats. Eagles, good showing, but another moral victory in what's been 3 seasons of those. Dolphins tonight. I have a tough time seeing them winning this one with the firepower they're up against, but you can never rule them out from at least keeping it close. I thought last week would be a blowout too, and they were right there on the final drive, close to winning it. So this feels like a similar season to the one we've watched the last couple of years. Maybe the talent level is a little higher across the board. You don't have the disaster at offensive coordinator you did last year. So this will probably be a more stable year, maybe even a playoff year. But there's just not that upside when you look at a team like Miami here that could go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's not solely, but it's up to Mac Jones. Like, Mac Jones has to.
You think it's all on him?
Not all on him, but in terms of upside, it's like you need your quarterback sometimes to be like, hey, like the reason we're going to be in this game is because I'm going to make the right decisions. And we saw it last week when Mac got into the flow of the game, like the throws are there, right? And he's making the throws he needs to. He goes over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. And there's sometimes when I just want him to like let it rip. It's like, hey, like, yeah, I understand you're very cerebral, and he's known as like a guy who is one of those like grinders. Like he's studying constantly. But there are times when it's like you were the 15th pick of the draft and you went to Alabama for a reason. It's like, just like let it go. There were games that like Tom Brady, yes, like greatest quarterback of all time. He's breaking things down. He's seeing things at a level that other guys just didn't see. But there was also an element to it where like he just trusted his work enough where he's like, all right, I'm letting it fly today. Like I'm really spinning it. I'm finding my guys. And it's so much easier said than done. And it's like, yeah, just go out there and win the game. You know what I mean? And that's not what I'm saying. But there are times when Mac
the aggressiveness, the risk taking. Yeah.
There's times when he's like short arming these little passes in the flat or the screen passes, and he's trying to get almost a little too cute with it. And it's like, but then we see him like hit Kendrick Bourne on an out and up for a touchdown in between 2 defenders. And it's like, it's there. You know what I mean? Like the talent is there. And so sometimes I would almost wish that he would just rely on that talent that he does have and just be like, I'm a quarterback in the NFL for a reason. Like Bill Belichick, greatest coach of all time, trusts me to be the starting quarterback for a reason. Like I got this.
Yeah. He's got the mind too. I love that he's making adjustments and stuff like that at the line now, back to that kind of style rather than whatever the hell they were doing last year. So I do have some optimism in him this year, but it can't be 500 again. You got to see some upside. You got to see some boom, boom, boom. He'll be the quarterback next year, I'm almost certain. But beyond that, you got to see some upside here. Got to see the playoffs. Got to see a playoff win at some point over the next couple of years here. He's Taylor McCloud. I'm excited to watch this one. We'll have coverage on Patriots Press Pass. Go subscribe over there. Taylor will be back next week or whenever we're live again here with the group chat show. Hoping to do more of these too as the season gets closer here. Taylor, thanks for joining us. I'll let you go here. And I'm going to tell the people about our great sponsors like HelloFresh of HelloFresh. And they got a great new offer. HelloFresh, 50% off your first order, plus 15% off the next 2 months when you sign up right now. It's food at your door, at your convenience. It's affordable, and it's fresh. That's why it's HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. 40-plus options right now, tons of sides, breakfast options, add-ons. You can basically build whatever kind of meal box you want here. get it when you want it. And that's what's the great part about it. It's meals in 15 minutes. All the ingredients are pre-packaged and pre-portioned, so it makes it easy along with the laid out instructions. I just love this product. It makes it fun. You're getting ingredients that you enjoy, and again, the convenience and speed factor, as well as the affordability factor, much cheaper than going out to eat, much cheaper than the grocery store. So go check out HelloFresh.com/CLNS50. Just give it a try. You'll get the 50% off that first order, 15% off the next 2 months if you want to roll with it. I've been thrilled with it when I've used it. One of my favorite sponsors we've ever had here. So go check it out, HelloFresh.com/CLNS50. Show us some love with that code CLNS50 and get 50% off and 15% off your next 2 months. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit, and AG1. Go to drinkag1.com/garden. Get a year's supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase over there. Just put out an Amias Keita breakdown on Celtics All Access. If you're not subscribing over there, go check it out. Love that pickup for them, even though it's just a two-way. I like the pedigree. I like the player. I like the build. So it's a good use of that two-way deal. I think a guy that could sneak on the court in a certain spot for them this year. And we'll have more Garden reports coming this week. Check out my Charles Lee feature, too. I love how that came out at BostonSportsJournal.com and CLNSmedia.com for all the Celtics articles as news starts to ramp up into camp. I saw Brissett arrive back in Boston today. Many players back there. Payton Pritchard said to the Globe, it's more and more involved and active early camp season here than he's seen in his 4 years. So love that. We'll be back there soon, starting first week of October with in-person coverage of the team and camp and all the rest. And we might have a guest from the Celtics coming on the Garden Report over the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. Celtics CLNS on Twitter, CLNS Media YouTube page, Celtics All Access YouTube page, and of course check out John Taylor and them on Patriots post game tonight after the Dolphins game. We'll be back soon. Subscribe, Dome Theory, wherever you get your podcast, and the Dome Theory Twitter handle. You'll see when we're going live, as well as on the YouTube channels here. And thanks to Taylor again. That's it for me tonight. This has been Dome Theory, and we'll talk to you soon.